In this video, we'll talk about customer journey campaigns and campaign sophistication. What does that mean? Let's break it down, because here we are going to take a lot of the concepts that you learned so far. So make sure if you skipped anything to just not do that. And we'll kind of tie everything together into a single concept of how to actually make successful campaigns for businesses, how to plan them, how to organize them, and how to kind of distribute your efforts. So first of all, we'll start with our favorite friend, the customer journey. And this image is a little bit misleading because it says that social ads only fall over here, but that's not really the case. With Facebook ads, you can create awareness campaigns, you can create consideration campaigns, direct to offer or purchase campaigns. You can use them to retain your customers, upsell them, and do promotions, satisfaction campaigns, even get some advocacy, testimonials, reviews, shares, word of mouth, and all of that. So social ads can be used throughout the entire customer journey. But then, up to what extent does it actually make sense for you to do that? This is where campaign sophistication comes into play. So the idea behind campaign sophistication is this: how complicated, how sophisticated should be your advertising depending on your product, service, or offer. So we know the various stages of the customer journey already, and if you don't know them, you can go back to the marketing fundamentals course and learn that stuff, because it's incredibly important to your success as a digital marketer. Now, so we have the customer journey stages. You know, people who don't know us, we bring them into the awareness stage. Now they know about us. Then they need to consider our offer, purchase our product, maybe purchase some more products, or we need to retain them in some way and then turn them into brand advocates, right? That's the general idea. But in terms of Facebook ads, we actually look at it in different ways, right? We can create all of these campaigns and name them that way, but that isn't really very, very practical. So in terms of the campaigns themselves, we think of people as cold audiences, warm audiences, hot audiences, which are already like customers, and then advocates, or like they fall into the hot customers category. So we have that separation on the one hand, and then we need to also consider what is the offer, like how expensive is it first. Maybe the price is kind of the more determining factor, or kind of how risky is the offer in terms of the perception of the customer. How do they see it? Like, if you may be selling something that costs $100, but if it's a pen, it's an expensive pen, so it's kind of a risky purchase, and that kind of makes it a difficult decision. But if for $100 you're selling a a full-fledged laptop that does everything that a normal laptop does, now that would be an incredible price and a very low risk purchase. So we need to kind of consider the risk of the purchase, and this is where kind of the entire BJ Fogg behavioral model comes into play. If you haven't seen that, you can check it out in the Google Ads course, and that's where things get tricky, because depending on your offer, you should decide how sophisticated your customer journey should be. Let's start with a few examples to get into it, and then we'll kind of break it down. So first, if you're selling something that's really easy to sell, let's say you're selling t-shirts, and they are, $20 t-shirts. Not very expensive, not a high-risk purchase. What should you do? You should obviously have just a direct-to-offer conversions campaign focused straight on purchases, no remarketing, maybe a bit of a remarketing, but then you wouldn't have great campaign sophistication and a super sophisticated customer journey, right? It's just simple. Click the ad, buy the product, and you're done. If you know, maybe like our Facebook page, follow our YouTube channel for more content, or join our Facebook group to see new amazing t-shirt designs. And that's kind of it. Maybe you can upsell them some more t-shirts because they're already your customers and know, like, and trust you. And then there's also a bunch of other things that you can do to move on from there. But really, that would be a very low sophistication of your campaigns. And then the next kind of step is, the more you increase the risk of the purchase and the more you have to explain or kind of showcase the value in your product, and you need to bring in trust factors, and the sale becomes more difficult, more complicated, then you have to kind of break it down. Maybe you can include a free trial of your product or service, or maybe some kind of clickbait, provide some free materials so people can get to know your brand, but you're still kind of hands off, right? You're not involving sales teams yet. You're not involving any specific customer education or lead nurturing or anything like that. But you still want to be doing, for example, email marketing, building your lists and growing an audience in that way. And that's kind of in the range between maybe $100 and $500, or also depends on your country and kind of the riskiness level of your product. But once things start getting riskier and more expensive than that, like somewhere between like the $500 and $1,000 range, you need to actually increase the sophistication of your marketing efforts by a significant margin. You need to kind of jump it up by an entire level of sophistication. There you will have different kinds of offerings. You will have a much more sophisticated customer journey with more steps, more things going on. And then if you have more steps in your customer journey, that would mean that you would have more campaigns to move people through these stages of the customer journey. Maybe you have to include content marketing, provide free materials, free courses. You need to start taking care of your reputation management, building an audience, becoming, maybe an influencer in your industry. At this point, you might also consider including a sales team, and that would mean lead generation campaigns, and you also need to nurture these leads on the way. And things become more and more complicated. So the more complicated they become, the more the sophistication of the customer journey increases, the more campaigns you need to include to take customers through that entire customer journey. And there's a lot more events and things to monitor and analyze, a lot more places where the bucket can actually leak. And so this is why we consider the campaign planning and the campaign sophistication at the same time. And there's also the fact that you need to consider your offer on the one hand, which is the what, that's kind of what you're selling, but then all of that ties up with your targeting, which should answer, who you're targeting, when do you reach them, where exactly do you reach them, what are the different touch points. And then your messaging becomes also more complicated, because the more steps you have, the longer the conversation becomes. This means that you have more messages. This means that you have more ads to optimize and streamline, and everything kind of has to work together. And so you should consider all of these factors. And another one that's also important to mention is that you shouldn't only think about the initial price of your sale or your product or service. Sometimes you might need to consider the entire customer lifetime value, because acquiring the customer may be more expensive than closing the first initial sale to create the contact with that customer. But over time, you will make that money back through the customer lifetime value. And if you manage to retain that customer, keep them happy, you would get much better results, and then your marketing would be worth it. So the question on how do you actually separate this and think about it is you really need to consider all of these concepts at the same time. And an important practice is to, even though your product may be sophisticated or complicated to sell, you should always be aiming at simplifying that process. Like, for example, if you're selling like maybe $1 million mansions or incredibly expensive products, you should try and simplify this as much as possible. And a good way to look at it is it should be a lot simpler than your competitors. And with simplicity, you can actually benefit from cost savings as well, which can help you have more successful campaigns, convert your customers easier, and so on. But the way to kind of apply everything that you have learned so far and all the different types of campaigns is to just first consider how to create the entire customer journey, how sophisticated it should be, and then try to get customers through that. If it's simple, the sale is low risk and cheap, then you should go with just an ad, direct offer, make the sale. If things become more expensive, you start offering maybe some free stuff, warming up the audience, and then using remarketing campaigns and additional arguments that you bring through those, you can kind of try and close the sale. But it doesn't make sense for you to sell something that's maybe has a $5 or $10 margin and then to have 7 different types of campaigns to make the sale. That's too sophisticated for the simplicity of the sale. So you should always be considering your customer journey and your campaign sophistication together so that you can have the best performance in your campaigns. And at the same time, I think it's a good idea to show a practical example of how all this comes together. Right? Let's jump back to our ad account, and you can see just by going through the course, we've created a large number of campaigns and we already deleted some of them. So let's take an example and create these types of campaigns for a growing sophistication of a business, right? So let's start with the t-shirts. So we will be creating a campaign that's focusing on the awareness stage of the customer journey. People don't know about us and we want to make the sale directly. We want to jump all these 3 phases need to happen inside of one campaign. So what do? We try to sell directly. So we combine the awareness, consideration, and the purchase phase into one in this case. And what are we going to do? We are going to go for a conversions campaign. That's why if you're selling t-shirts, you shouldn't have a traffic campaign and then a remarketing campaign and then maybe or even a consideration campaign in the middle. That's just too much advertising for such a simple sale. And anyways, I recommend that you do all of your cold audience or awareness campaigns with the conversion objectives, or well, maybe not all, but let's say about 90% of them, so that you can actually have more and more success, right? People are going to become aware of your business, even with the conversions objective, when they click on your website, come and maybe complete some conversion. Of course, always name templates, and we will call this one direct to offer, right? This campaign will be a direct offer campaign, and then when we structure our ad sets, they will be focusing on what? The purchase campaign. Obviously, we don't need to make anything more complicated. We're not going to have one that's focusing on a click, and then one that's focusing on the add to cart, and then another one that's focusing on engagement, and then another one focusing on the initiate checkout, so on. We go straight for the purchase because that's kind of how things are going to work. But if things become more complicated, and of course we're going to have an ad that directly shows the product, people can see it, can see the value in it, in the visual of the ad, they can see the price, and they can see everything that they need to know to make the decision whether or not they want to buy it straight from the ad. So if they click, they see the same thing on the product page, click buy, and then done. That's kind of how you make that campaign. And then for this business, if once someone has purchased, we can of course employ remarketing campaign to show them other cool designs related to what they purchased. That's a great thing to do. And then we're going to have just 2 campaigns. Maybe for the people who have not purchased anything, we can add a small remarketing campaign, but small means small in budget. We don't want to spend too much money remarketing to people who did not make that instant decision. It should be an instant decision. Again, thinking about it in the BJ Fogg behavioral model, that should be a simple sell. And if we don't make the simple sell, we should look at maybe our targeting or our product, but we should not increase the sophistication of the campaigns. Now, let's say that now we are selling a $250 t-shirt. We don't want to be doing that. So let's close this up. Now, if we're not going to do a direct to offer campaign, but let's say we're selling a $250 product, that could be, for example, Masters Academy is a good example. That is in the current price for it with the early bird is around that. And so, or we could take the t-shirt example. So with the t-shirt, we have to think, like if it's a $200 t-shirt, we need to think about a bit more, like people would be asking the question, why is it so expensive? And then we need to provide all that. So first of all, we are going to have a more sophisticated landing page. We are going to have more a narrower targeting. So it's not everyone that's going to buy that, like the $200 t-shirt. So we need to narrow down our targeting, and we need to consider how exactly our messaging should go. We need to maybe spend some more effort to conduct customer interviews and conduct customer development to figure out how to make the sale, and then figure out who's going to buy and not, because then just the sale itself is more complicated. And then because the sale has a larger margin, this means that we can actually include more advertising into that, right? We can have a more sophisticated marketing campaign. We can have a separate awareness campaign of people learning about our brand and why we make amazing quality t-shirts that have incredible materials and fit perfectly and all of that. And they are super stylish and made by incredible designers and all that. And then we are going to have that in the awareness phase. And then in the consideration, we are going to be presenting different models and talking about the quality, the materials, and so on. And then in the purchase campaigns, after we have brought our arguments, we would be offering maybe stuff like a promotion, maybe a discount, or maybe if we want to keep the brand quality, maybe we should be focusing on certain other things to close the sale. And then once a customer has made such a valuable purchase, we should definitely be working a lot more on retention, and we'll be doing a lot, like everything possible to keep that customer coming. We would be doing everything from research and development to improve the quality of our products, increase the sophistication of our marketing in all different walks of life, from reputation to exposure to maybe organic channels, reputation management, audience building, becoming influencers. We should nurture these people, kind of even maybe send them some cool stuff, a happy birthday or anything like that, and then try and turn them into advocates, because people who buy t-shirts for $200 probably are in touch with other people who would buy t-shirts for $200. And so advocacy again becomes very, very important. And just by taking a look at this difference between a $20 t-shirt, which has a $5 margin, and the sophistication of the campaigns that we can afford for that, and then increasing the price to $200, and the sophistication we need to do for that is completely different. And again, this is also something that you should consider in great detail when you actually do campaigns for other businesses, maybe for your clients, or for a company that you work in. When someone gives you a task to sell something that's more difficult to sell, you need to understand that it's not just more difficult to sell, but you need to increase the sophistication of the marketing by a level of sophistication, right? So that would mean more campaigns, more analysis, more research, better landing pages, more communication with customers, more narrow targeting. Everything gets a level of sophistication harder. And again, if you bring that to the $2,000 t-shirt, then you would probably have everything that we've talked about so far, and then you would have a store, a real life store where people can walk in. They need to try it. Now for $2,000, I need to test it. I need to put it on myself and see if it fits, if it's good, if I look awesome in it. And then you're gonna have people, sales, you could call them, right? Then your campaigns would be like getting someone to the store to see how amazing your product is, or maybe getting them to watch a course or engage with your content. It's kind of the same idea. And then it's kind of lead generation, lead nurturing, and then they will be in touch at some point with a live, real person who should be closing the sales. And you have lead generation and sales, and you have a much longer research phase, a much longer consideration phase. So your reputation management becomes much more important, and you need to be, like when someone checks if you're good enough, everyone needs to say that you're good enough to make the sale for the $2,000 t-shirt or whatever kind of more expensive and more complicated product. And so all of that needs to be considered, and you often need to consider additional steps of the customer journey that are happening offline. So that would be contacts with your customer service team, contacts with or touch points with your fulfillment center. That would be things like maybe delayed orders. Like if you're selling $2,000 t-shirts, they better not come late, right? And so all of this is kind of increasing the level of sophistication of the marketing efforts that you need to put in. And then that's kind of where marketers get into the business optimization area, because you need to make sure that your fulfillment is great, that your customer service is great, that every single touch point throughout that large customer journey has no friction, ABCs of marketing and that idea, the acceleration, brakes, and clutch moments. And you need to make sure that your customer journey is streamlined. You need to be able to track and analyze each point, and to bring all the data in one place, conduct that complete analysis, and make your optimizations along the way to get it to a point where your marketing is good enough and sophisticated enough to cover that sale, and you have to streamline the entire customer journey. So this is a very important concept that you should keep in mind when planning different types of campaigns. And I just wanted to create this video to make you aware of the relationship between the customer journey and the campaign sophistication, together with the sales sophistication as well. So always take all these factors into consideration: your customer journey length, your audiences, your product targeting and messaging, and the sophistication of the sale itself. So that's everything for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.